Welcome to Current Affairs. My name is Nathan Robinson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Current Affairs magazine. I am joined today by Nick Hanauer. Having made his fortune originally as a venture capitalist, Nick Hanauer became what used to be called a class traitor. He became infamous about 10 years ago for warning the plutocrats that eventually, if American inequality stayed as it was, the pitchforks and the torches will come for them. He founded Civic Ventures and Civic Action. He helped kick off the campaign for a $15 minimum wage in Seattle. His progressive economic commentary has appeared in the Democracy Journal of the Nation, the American Prospect, Politico, and elsewhere. He is the host of the podcast Pitchfork Economics with Nick Hanauer, and he has now published a new book, Corporate Bullshit, exposing the lies and half-truths that protect profit, power, and wealth in America, co-authored with Joan Walsh and Donald Cohen, who appeared on the program a few months ago to discuss his book, The Privatization of Everything. Corporate Bullshit is available now from the New Press. Nick Hanauer, thank you so much for joining us on Current Affairs today.
Thank you, Nathan. So great to be here.
Now, you said on a recent podcast introducing this book to the public that as someone who has been in corporate boardrooms your whole life, there's nothing you know more than the extent to which some of your business colleagues will go to lie to protect their power and profits. I would describe that as a strong statement. Can you justify that statement, Nick Hanauer?
Well, I would like to think that the boards that I've been on have represented companies that have been less nefarious than some of the worst offenders
Yes, I assume you mean the colleagues in the world of business, not your particular colleagues in your own businesses.
Yeah, but for sure, I don't think it's possible to dispute that claim. It only takes sort of a cursory reading of history to acquaint yourself with the degree to which folks will defend the truly indefensible. From trying to justify slavery by telling themselves and other people that the slavery was good for the slaves, to trying to prevent women from having the vote by telling them that by giving women the right to vote that we would harm women, that climate change doesn't exist, that lead in paint is harmless, that seatbelts will create more harm than good. That it goes on, and Nathan. I just don't think it's challengeable
right.
as a statement that people will defend the indefensible. But for me, the defining experience for me in this world was trying to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which is where I got first acquainted with, in a direct and visceral way, the degree to which people would defend their interests with lies and malfeasance. And if you try to raise the minimum wage, and certainly when we started to try to do that in 2012, which is basically when we cooked up the idea for 15, the thing you heard again and again and again was that if you raise wages, it kills jobs, right? Yes. And the more you raise them, the more jobs you kill.
Oh yeah.
So the thing about me, Nathan, is that I've run businesses since I was a wee child.
Yes.
I went to work in the family business when I was 7 or 8 years old. I've been working in businesses and running businesses my entire life. And the thing I know better than almost anybody is that in the absence of customers, there is no business. If nobody has any money, who will buy the stuff? When I looked into the empirical evidence around raising wages, what I found was that there was literally zero empirical evidence that when you raised wages, it killed jobs. And as we worked on this project, more and more empirical evidence flowed in. And yet, no matter how much evidence we could show our opponents, they never stopped making the claim that if you raised wages, it killed jobs. And it finally occurred to me, took me a longer time than most to come to this obvious conclusion.
Mm.
Opponents weren't saying that raising wages killed jobs because it was true. They were saying it because it was the most effective strategy they had ever found to keep wages low and profits high. Because, of course, if you can persuade people that raising wages kills jobs and will harm the very people you're intending to help, then reasonable people will conclude that it makes no sense to raise wages, that to do so is both impractical and immoral, and so we should keep wages low and therefore profits high.
Well, and they'll be scared of it.
That's right. That's right. I want to underscore what you just said, because when you really come to understand this claim, it sounds like a claim on economic cause and effect. What it really is an intimidation tactic masquerading as economics. That's what it is. It's a threat. It's a con job. It's a way of saying to people, in the way that mobsters used to, that's a very nice job you have there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, right? Like, and like, look, for you and I, Nathan, who grew up obviously in pretty fortunate circumstances and have really pretty cushy circumstances, losing a job is an inconvenience. But for millions and millions and millions of people around the country and the world, losing a job is an existential threat to their, and so, and, when I looked around, I saw a lot of this. And here's the really amazing thing. Is like, if you just zoom out, think about it. Why does the Chamber of Commerce never say the truth, which is, hey, the less we pay you, the more money we make, and the bigger our executive bonuses are.
Yeah, you'd think that'd be important.
Like, so we don't care about you or your family. We just care about our bonuses and our profits. So screw you. So why is that never said? It was like, why do they never say that? Why do they never say, well, we make a lot of profit on that poison? Like, we don't want to not do it. It's profitable as hell to poison you. So I have this friend named Molly Crockett, who's a really brilliant neuroscientist and does research on human moral reasoning. And I called her up and I'm like, Molly, what is this about? And she said, oh, Nick, this is so simple. Like, the thing about human moral reasoning is the most important element of it is intention. What you intend is the most important thing, which is why if you purposefully kill somebody, you go to jail or worse. And if you're driving down the freeway and somebody jumps off an overpass and hits your car and dies, you don't go to jail, right? Because obviously you didn't intend that. It wasn't your fault. You couldn't have avoided it. And even though the people are equally dead, correct?
Yeah.
And so she said the reason that these things are framed in this way is that they are disguising their intention. Because if they just said the truth, people would want to burn their houses down. And the more I zoomed out, the more I looked around the world, the more obvious it became that this was a pattern that existed in every domain. And as luck would have it, bumped into a guy, an absolutely amazing organizer and, social justice warrior named Donald Cohen, who had the same kind of experience. And because he was better organized than I was, he took a sabbatical and he went to the Library of Congress and he created a database of these kinds of objections.
Yeah.
Thousands of them. And he called it the Cry Wolf Project, and he didn't know what to do with it. And he gifted it to my team at Civic Ventures. And we sat on it for a couple of years, not really knowing what to do with it. And then we decided, my God, if we could put these quotes in front of people somehow, once you see the patterns, it effectively inoculates you against the future claims, right? Once you see that they always say these things and they're never true, then the next time they say it, it won't be true. And that's where the idea for this book was born, is we thought that we could organize these things in a way so that when you show them to people, they're like, holy shit. Like, they always say that. And they always say it in this way, and it's always a lie. And so the next time I hear it, I'm not going to buy it. Right?
Yeah, because you superficially, the argument that the $15 minimum wage kills jobs could be true.
No, it's plausible.
Right?
It's plausible.
It's plausible.
Yeah.
And what you point out, in fact, in this book is that a lot of these corporate bullshit arguments, they are effective in part because there's a story, there's a theory of the world under which they could be true.
Yes.
And economists actually used to, before the sort of rise of the kind of empirical turn in economics, which was like, instead of just doing theory, maybe we should look at what happens in the world. Economists used to believe this would happen. But economists, the profession, kind of changed its mind as the evidence came in. So a lot of this could be true in theory. So these stories are very, very powerful a lot of
That's
the time.
right. They're always plausible. It is plausible that you can drink lead and not die, right? It's plausible that cigarettes are not terrible for you, right? Like, it's plausible that climate change isn't real. And of course, there are some people who are inclined to believe these things. Like, if you love to smoke, it's music to your ears that smoking isn't bad for you, right? You don't want to believe it's bad for you. Right. And I mean, you and I both know that a world, like, wouldn't you love to not believe that climate change is an existential threat to the planet? Like, it would be great.
I would very much like to believe that.
Right. It would be great to believe that. And so, you know, these lies have a certain internal logic and power, but they are almost never true. And, you know, dude, you show me an entrenched, powerful interest, I will be able to point you to a bunch of narratives that defend those interests, irrespective of how egregious they may be. And people have asked me before, where the next lie is going to come from? And my answer is very simple. Wherever you find concentrated power and wealth. Wherever that is. So right now, that's in social media, right? Well, it's not us that's screwing things up. You know, like, social media is good for you, right? Like, it should be your choice. And if you don't want your kids to look at Instagram, then just stop them, and, you know, blah, 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 right? Like, it's always the same.
Right. Sorry. Well, just on social media, you know, Mark Zuckerberg has a quote where he says, "But it wouldn't be in our interest to make our customers depressed and angry, and the various ills that are attributed to social media." And that's kind of one of the
free market would never do that.
Pieces of rhetoric is,
we would never do that.
We do that. We
only have good incentives.
We don't have bad incentives. We only have incentives to help our customers, to please our customers. Why would we kill our customers? That would be bad for us. Can you tell us why that's bullshit? Because
we identify 6 basic stories. The free market can fix it being one of the biggest ones, right? And this is the argument, of course, is that the market will always regard good behavior and punish bad, right? In other words, we couldn't be successful as Facebook if our behavior was bad, because the market wouldn't reward us in the way that it has. But of course, this is just absolute nonsense. This is the argument that was made to try to prevent civil rights laws for private businesses. Well, and Milton Friedman argued that they were completely unnecessary, that a racist business would be disadvantaged, and therefore, you know, you're just harming the economy by requiring people to be held to a certain standard. You know, as the Chamber of Commerce told Congress in 1973, employers do not deliberately allow work conditions to exist which cause injury or illness. Safety is good business, which may kind of be true in theory, in some perfect world, but has no connection to what actually happens on planet Earth, right? Like, it's just not true. And, you know, people make harmful products all the time because they tend to be very profitable to make. And, you know, Facebook is an enormously profitable company. And the harm they are causing in the world does not cost them any money. It only costs us money. So that they don't care.
They don't.
They don't have to.
Right.
And so, But, you know, another big one of the, you know, sort of the top sort of lines of bullshit is it's not a problem, right? Because that's where Facebook started, of course, which is what? Not a problem. All these suicides, all these teen suicides, that, you know, don't look at us. Right? That's not us. The problem doesn't actually exist. Disasters are a natural part, for example, of working in coal mines. Pay no attention to the 50,000 miners who were killed last year, right? Like, you know.
You know, my training is originally in law, and there's this thing in law, arguing in the alternative. which is I didn't do it, but if I did it, it was self-defense, right? And the arguing in the alternative seems to come up a lot, which is which is
yes,
climate
certainly
change
not our
isn't
fault.
happening,
Yeah.
but if it is,
That's right.
we're fixing it through the market.
And and another classic is it's not our fault, it's your fault, right? If you're injured on the job, you must have been careless. You choked on the product, well, or your kid choked on the product, well, you shouldn't let them near it. Whatever it is, it's all about lazy bargaining hunting
blaming
consumers.
the customer.
The 2008 housing crash, that wasn't Wall Street, that wasn't the banks. That was greedy people who wanted homes they couldn't afford, right? Like it's never us, it's you.
They couldn't afford, yeah.
And then the one that, of course, that I have come up against so many times in my career working on economic policy, of course, is it's a job killer. It's a job killer, right? How many times have you heard that? Like you raise taxes on the rich, you can't. It'll kill jobs. Regulate big corporations, you can't. It will kill jobs. Raise wages for working people, you can't. It will kill jobs, right? And Nathan, what's so fascinating about this, part of the job killing thing, it just gets me, is that we live in a world which has been turned so upside down by this market fundamentalist framework that anything you propose to do that will improve the lives of middle class or working people has to affirmatively prove that it will do no harm. But anything good that happens to the truly rich is an unalloyed good, right? So infinite bonuses on Wall Street, a sign of economic growth and success. A tiny increase in the minimum wage, very dangerous job killer. And when it is completely obvious that the more money you pay working people, the more jobs that creates. And the more money you pay people on Wall Street for securitizing imaginary assets, the more jobs you kill, right? If you took $1 trillion of the excess profits that corporations are making and rich people are making today and spread that out through the economy, at $50,000 per, that's 20 million jobs, right? Like it's a lot of jobs. So if you want to, if you're really concerned about what's killing jobs in America, it's the concentration of income and wealth at the top. That's what's killing the jobs.
Yeah. Because I think we should say that it is not just helpful to an understanding of the world to see through corporate bullshit, but it'll make you angry because you start to realize the size of the gap in what we could do and what we could have and what we do have, and the way that these fallacious arguments that are being made by people who don't even care whether they're true, they just care whether they can scare you. These things are essentially causing a lot of unnecessary harm and suffering.
That's right. That's right. And so, Nathan, one of the sort of animating principles of how I think about organizing is converting fear to anger. So if you look at the objections or the strategies that our opponents use, they are almost always rooted in an intent to create fear, right? Again, raising wages kills jobs is the canonical example of that, right? It's an intimidation tactic masquerading as economics. But once you begin to teach people that they're not saying it because it's true, they're saying it because it's a really good way to bully you, people's fear recedes and it's replaced with anger. And anger is useful, right? Because anger animates people. It makes them willing to fight. And us corporate overlords want people to be fearful, right? We don't want them to be angry. Angry is scary, right?
Yeah.
If people get angry, then we have to change. If people are fearful, we don't have to change. So in that way, I think that this book works to do that, right? We want to inoculate people in a way in their minds against these lies so that when they hear them anew, they're not intimidated by them, they're angered by them. And when you're angry, you're willing to act. And I think that's so important to drive change in the world.
You said in an earlier answer, if we have a cursory reading of history, we can see through this stuff. But it struck me as you were saying that alas, I don't think
No, for sure
most
not.
of us get a cursory reading of history. I mean, I write professionally about politics and economics. I consider myself fairly literate in this stuff, and a ton of the examples that your team has excavated here and you write about here
They're
are totally new to
shocking.
me. I mean, they're
Dude,
kind
they're
of
so shocking. Like with the things that people said, you can't even believe they said them, right? Yeah, I mean, in my introduction to the book, I say, it's all about defending the indefensible. But there's some indefensible stuff that went down over the years, and no matter how indefensible it was, there was some corporate executive or their lackey in Congress who was willing to defend it. Right? It's just unbelievable what people will say
Yeah.
to protect power and profit.
Well, you have Lee Iacocca, for example, at Ford, saying that seatbelts are a complete waste of money. And incredibly, he said the Clean Air Act could prevent the continued production of automobiles. That is, you pass this act, Clean Air Act, no more cars. So, I mean, again, but you see in there the same thing as the $50 minimum wage. They scare you. They're trying to take away your car. You won't have a car if they pass this regulation.
No, it's just absolutely amazing. I feel bad I can't dig it out exactly, but you had Mike Pence, as recently as I think it was 2002, claim that smoking wasn't bad for you. Like, I just, what? Like, it's just unbelievable what people will say. And of course, the bigger the social harm, the more people who will rush to to protect industry, especially if there's a lot of profit that is at play.
Yeah. Chrysler saying there's no evidence of a threat to your health from automotive emissions. National lead company saying lead helps to guard your health. Then you have the kind of right-wing think tanks like the Cato Institute saying the subprime mortgage market offers a good example of competition at work, like right before that crisis.
It just never ends. So anyway, I mean, I think that, one of the things I would love for people to know about the book is this is not a textbook. It's not a tome. It's a coffee table book, right? I mean, the point of it is to be fun. And it's filled with cartoons and pictures and quotes. And, it's not meant as this sort of academic grind where you get the book and you kind of have to, underline it and grind through it. It's really meant as a sort of a fun thing to look at and put down and look at and put down. Again, the thing that was kind of in our heads is sort of a coffee table book for informed citizens and honestly, it's really funny when you read this stuff. You just can't believe that people would say it. So it's both heavy and light all at the same time. 2 for 1.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff is quite depressing, actually.
Yeah.
It is fun. As you've mentioned, when you put the evidence in one place, you start to see patterns. The patterns educate you. They make you. I mean, what they do is not just give you a knowledge of history, but like sort of educate you in critical thinking. And I feel like if you could teach everyone in the country one skill, you want to teach them critical thinking. The information you get. How do you analyze it? How do you figure out, what's well grounded in fact, or what's a bunch of crap? Why people are telling you one thing, how do you look at what the motivations behind some piece of information might be? I feel like if everyone could just grasp critical thinking, we would be a hell of a lot better off.
No. That is true. Look, most people it's just not fair to blame people generally for this stuff because, everybody's just trying to go along their, through their lives and make their way. The typical citizen doesn't have the resources or the time to take the minimum wage, do an analysis of the empirical economic literature, right? But by the way, even if you have the time to parse the economic speak and you have to be an expert to figure this stuff out. It's not fair to expect people to understand these things or to know, for example, what the harm that lead can do to you. How would people know?
Right. It's why the bullshit works.
That's right. This is why the bullshit works. And, and in many ways, why it's so indefensible is because you're just really taking advantage of people in a really unfair way. And
well, That's why I like what you do on your podcast, and it's some of what we try to do at Current Affairs too, is that understanding that people get such low quality information delivered to them, such unreliable information, and they don't really have a way of knowing who to trust.
Right.
We as independent media have to go out and find the trustworthy information. So you get all of these economists on who actually know what they're talking about, all of these policy professionals, people that people often haven't heard of, who are really, really intelligent and insightful and can explain in an accessible way, let's set aside the bullshit and let's talk about how the economy actually works.
Yeah, that's what we have to do. And, you do it in your magazine and podcasts, and we try to do it in our own little way. But as you know, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because the bullshit out there is thick.
Yes. There's that rule of, it takes an order of magnitude more time to refute a piece of bullshit than to create it.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it, but it was true.
I want to ask you about you personally just a little bit because, as I mentioned, you became infamous as the guy from the plutocracy who came out and warned about the pitchforks. So I wanted to ask you, because I always kind of wanted to ask you, when was it in your life and how was it that you kind of looked at the social class that you were in, the world of business that you inhabited, and said to yourself, there's something wrong here. This really discomforts me. I can't live with it. I have to speak and say something. What was it that kind of triggered that? Because obviously most people in your position, that doesn't happen to.
Yeah. So a couple of things. I start out as a moderately empathetic person. I think that helps. Caring about other people a little bit is sort of table stakes, if I could put it that way. But the real turning point for me, Nathan, was in about 2006 or 2007. I got to look at the IRS tax tables that are published that showed the change in income shares. So in 1980, the top 1% of Americans shared about a little bit more than 8% of national income. And by, I think it was 2007, that number had gone from 8 to 22% or 23%, something like that. And the bottom 50% of Americans in 1980, I think, shared in the range of 18% of national income. And by 2007, it had fallen from 18 to, I believe, 12. And I just threw those numbers in an Excel spreadsheet and said, what happens if this trend simply continues for another 30 years? And the answer was revolution, right? Like you just like, you can't not have that. Because I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but the share of income for the top 1% was going to go to 40% or 50%, and the bottom 50% were going to share not 12 but 5 or 3. Or I was like, okay, we're in deep shit, because you don't have to have a PhD in political philosophy or history or economics to look at those numbers and think, ruh-roh. This is not going to work out. It's particularly not going to work out for the people at the top. And so that was kind of the door cracking open for me. I was like, oh, Jesus, this is like this. And then I started to peel back the layer of the onions. I'm like, okay, well, how did this happen? Because it didn't used to be this way. And then I'd always had this sneaking suspicion that orthodox economics was a pack of lies. It's the only course in college I dropped. I took I spent a month in this Econ 101 class and just concluded that these people had no idea how the world actually worked. But the more I learned about economics, about the conventional way in which economists thought about cause and effect and the underlying assumptions they made, the more it became clear to me that it was internally consistent, mathematically elegant, and ultimately a protection racket for the rich. If you took any of this stuff seriously and enact policy on the basis of it, the only outcome would be that the rich would get richer and everybody else would get poorer. And I suppose I've been always animated by a mixture of empathy and an enlightened sense of self-interest, right? Which is
right. Well, the pitchforks thing is like, look, guys.
And, Trump, Brexit, all of this is that prediction
Yeah.
coming true, right? Why are people ready to burn American democracy down? The answer to that is very simple. Because for 50 years, the bottom 90% of Americans haven't gotten a raise, while the top 1% live beyond the dreams of avarice. Like, it is undeniably true that for 50 years, the lives of working and middle class Americans have gotten shittier and harder, while effectively all of the benefits of economic growth have gone to the top 1 or 2%. And it is impossible to sustain a democracy if the majority of citizens are absolutely clear about the fact that it does not benefit them, right? It's just impossible. The thing will collapse. And again, you don't have to have a PhD in history to know that that's what always happens, right? Like any kind of cursory examination of history,
right,
from Greeks on forward, right?
Yeah.
You show me a highly unequal society, I'll show you a police state or a revolution, one or the other. It can't not happen. And so the thing is that, a lot of my friends think I'm super lefty. I don't think I'm super lefty. I'm just like, look, it shouldn't be controversial that every single person that works for a big company is paid enough money so they can live in dignity without needing food stamps. This shouldn't be controversial, right?
Right.
This is not a big deal, right? Like, capitalism is either a good system or it's not. If it's a good system, it can't come tumbling down because you're required to pay your people enough to get by without government assistance. Like, fucking figure it out. Like, it's not that hard, right? And so anyway, I've been animated by that basic conception since. But in truth, the more I learn about how our system is set up, what the ideas are that undergird it, the policy agendas that we have pursued over the last 50 years, the clearer it has become just how screwed up it all was, how bad the ideas were that animated it, and how clear it is that we have to fix it and get ourselves back on the right track.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, is that a good answer to that question?
Yeah, that's a good answer. That's an excellent answer. I'm pleased with that answer. No, so the book highlights that, a lot of continuity over time. The way that a lot of these arguments don't change. They're the same from generation to generation. The injustices, the different injustices, same bullshit. I think you would probably agree that capitalism, the age of what is called neoliberalism, has become a little more ruthless and insane and cruel over the past few decades. But as I was looking into your background, I found it really interesting that your family had a company that made pillows and bedding. I found this really fascinating because it made me think of the most infamous manufacturer of pillows in this country, who is Mike Lindell of MyPillow. And what I was thinking was, as I was reading about your family's company, founded in the 1880s by immigrants, right? A kind of unsexy, almost in a certain way. I mean that as a compliment, right? Pillow company. And then you have this guy who seems to embody a very different way of selling pillows, right? Which is this. I mean, he tells people just outright fraud, like this pillow will cure everything. He goes on television like he is very Trumpy in the selling of pillows. And there's almost like an analogy between like you could sell pillows, you could have the age of selling pillows the Mike Lindell way, or like the way that your family did it in the like early part of the 20th century.
Well, So Nathan, I have founded myself or helped found, I think, in the range of 40 companies. Some of those companies are among the largest companies in the world. And as I reflect on my business career, the only product I ever made that I think was unambiguously good for the world were the pillows that my family business made. Because we made these really great down pillows. By the way, down the feathers are a waste byproduct of the poultry industry, right? They're going to throw them away if you don't turn them into pillows. And It's basically cotton, and then you get the pillow, you get the feathers, and you wash them in soap and water. This is a very harmless process. And then you kind of use air to separate the good ones from the bad ones. And you put them in the pillow and you sew it closed. It's a terrible business in the sense that it's pretty commodity-like. The margins are very low and so on and so forth. But we end up making these products, both comforters and pillows, that people loved, that lasted decades, that were a great value. And when you're done with your pillow, if you open it up and put the feathers in the garden, all it is nitrogen, right? And it's just a great natural fertilizer. Couldn't be like a better product for the world, right? It was a really cool business in that sense. And then Mike Lindell comes along with this MyPillow thing. And can I tell you, I'm just going to tell you a technical detail about being in the television promotion product business, is that those business models only work if you have a margin of at least 400%. In other words, if you can't find a way to sell the product for at least 4 to 5 times what it costs you to make, the math doesn't work.
Yeah.
So believe you me, I looked 1,000 ways at trying to be in that business. But the problem is that if you make a good pillow, if you want to make a pillow that will actually work well for humans, you're going to have to spend in the manufacturing plant in the range of $20 to $30 per pillow, which means that you would have to retail it for $120 or something like that, which won't work. I think his pillows retail for like $20, which means that it costs him like $2 or $3 or $4 to make one of those things. And they are a piece of shit. They're just,
the reviews seem to speak for themselves.
They're just a piece of shit. He just grinds up garbage and puts it in cheap fabric and calls it a pillow.
Yeah.
And that business model was never available to us because we made a product that just wouldn't survive those margins. Of course, many years ago, when I was thinking about being in that business, it never occurred to me that the same sort of ethic that he applied to his product development would apply to his politics too. But then, of course, there it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just think it's very interesting that, I mean, people always look at, the pillow guy into going into right-wing politics, but I look at, the connection between like the right-wing politics and how you make and sell a product. Right. And, and that is the kind of ethic, which is how can I gouge people? What a ruthlessness. Yeah.
And Billy, I mean, in the same way that his politics are a lie, his product is a lie too.
Yeah. No, there've been all sorts of things about, as I say, promising it cures whatever ails you. You'll sleep better. Hey, the last thing I wanted to ask you here was, there's been a lot of reporting on the way that, despite a lot of strong economic indicators under Joe Biden, ordinary people still don't feel great about the economy. And, you've been a supporter of a lot of Biden's economic policies. I think you think that he's, exceeded expectations probably in a lot of what he's done. He's been very pro-labor and what have you. But you are also a person who pays attention a lot to the sources of people's anger and discontent. And so, this thing that a lot of pundits kind of find this paradox. Why could people possibly be unhappy? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you understand why people could still be unhappy and frustrated.
Yeah. Both these things make perfect sense to me. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, the Biden administration has been undeniably and objectively the most successful administration with respect to economic policy, really since Roosevelt. Nobody comes close. When you add up their accomplishments and the way, not just their accomplishments, but additionally, the way in which they have begun to shift the narrative around economic cause and effect, right? Moving from a focus on making rich people richer to building the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Absolutely transformational. And again, when you add up all the accomplishments, it boggles the mind. Trillions and trillions of dollars being invested back into the economy. So that is true. That's a fact. Another fact is that for the majority of citizens, the benefits of that has not trickled down to them, right? It hasn't touched them yet. What they have just experienced is the largest period of increasing prices that the country has gone through in decades, right? And I think inflation is the wrong word. We don't really have a price-wage spiral. What we had is a huge increase in prices as a consequence of the biggest supply chain shock in 100 years. And although unemployment is very low, for 95% of Americans, they already had a job, right? Like they had a job. All they know is that they didn't earn very much before, and now prices are significantly higher, and life has not gotten materially easier. They're not running a counterfactual in their head saying, well, I mean, if it hadn't been for all these things,
how would it have been? Yeah.
Unemployment would be much higher and maybe things would have been worse, right? So it is undeniably true that Bidenomics, the middle out economic strategy that they have employed, has done enormous amounts of good for the economy, but it is not visible to people who do not read the New York Times every day. Right? If you're just a working family in the country, you may earn a little bit more than you did, but you're not earning 50% more than you did. And the price of milk is up.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's your reality. For 95% of Americans, the economy does not exist as an abstraction. They don't look at the GDP numbers. It is my job and the expenses. And that's it. And that is totally fair. Be clear that the Biden administration got done what the Congress would allow them to do. They would have raised the minimum wage to $15 or $20 an hour if Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema had not been senators, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would have done a bunch of other things that would have materially impacted more people in an immediate way if the Congress had been different, but they couldn't. And so we are left with a policy agenda, which is really an extraordinary accomplishment, but has not yet benefited a lot of people. Boy, that is so frustrating to them. And I work very closely with them, and I know how frustrating that is to them. And it's frustrating to people like you and me who kind of do see the abstractions, right? We are watching every bill that's passed. We're doing the calculations on the amount of investment that's going into manufacturing and stuff like that. But again, unless you live in one of those towns where they're building a factory right now and you just got a big new job, like it's not sinking in. So again, for Democrats, and particularly for wonky Democrats like you and me, it's a point of frustration, but I do not think it should surprise us, given the realities on the ground.
Yeah, that's my take. Is I don't feel like there's much of a paradox there. It's just really unfortunate that it might lead to the return of Donald Trump to the presidency.
I'm more optimistic than that, but it is frustrating.
Well, Nick Hanauer, the book is Corporate Bullshit, co-authored with Donald Cohen and Joan Walsh. About the book, Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor, says if you ever feel like you're fighting the same bogus corporate arguments over and over, read this useful book to help you respond to every standard BS claim. Teach everyone the truth. Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's says whether it's 1923 or 2023, the same trickle-down nonsense used in every boardroom in America hasn't changed. This book pulls back the curtain on the whole racket in a way that leaves you unsure whether to laugh or cry, but sure of one thing, it's not true, and it's never been true. Nick Hanauer, thank you so much for joining us on Current Affairs today.
Thank you so much, Nathan. It was really fun to talk.
The Current Affairs Podcast is a product of Current Affairs Magazine. If you are not subscribed to Current Affairs Magazine, visit currentaffairs.org/subscribe today and get our glorious print edition. The Current Affairs Podcast is released regularly every week on patreon.com/currentaffairs. Thanks for listening.